Hello, and welcome to Mental Health Matters. I'm your host, Liz Lang. Each week on this podcast, we will break down various aspects of mental health. We are so excited you're here and hope you enjoy this week's episode. Hey guys, Liz Lang here with Jeremiah and Selina Woodruff from Core Connection. And this week, we are going to get into the calm inside the chaos. But first, I am going to do today's parenting moment. So this is something that happened a while ago, but I thought it was pertinent. So about 6 months ago, so it was around towards the end of last calendar year, I was just feeling really stressed and overwhelmed. I had a lot going on. I started to get this thought that I didn't have my kids involved in enough extracurricular activities, right? And so a big part of it is I was comparing myself to other families who had their kids in all these sports and they were doing all these things. And I'm like, man, are my kids missing out? Am I not doing enough because I don't have my kids involved in all these activities? And Teddy Roosevelt had it right when he said comparison is the thief of joy. Because anytime you start comparing yourself to someone else, it's just not a good situation. And so as I was able to think it through, I realized, okay, no, my kids are involved. They're maybe not being involved in sports, which my oldest, she doesn't like sports, which is fine. That's okay. But she is involved. They're doing other things. We have piano lessons. They're very involved in church. And I also tried to give myself grace. They have a special needs brother who requires a lot of care. And part of the guilt is because I was in school. And so I felt it's like, am I sacrificing my kid's childhood for my education? And that wasn't it at all. So don't compare yourselves to other people is the point. And also don't overschedule your kids. That's another thing. Because as I thought about it, I'm like, you know what? My kids do some things, but they also have a lot of time to just be a kid and to hang out with their friends. And kids need that as well. So that's my parenting moment. Don't compare and let your kid be a kid.
Love it.
Yeah.
I think that's great advice. And we do just over the schedule the heck out of our children sometimes. And
yeah,
definitely not good for them. They need that space to be a kid. And I think you're doing great.
Yeah. And I mean, extracurricular activities are fantastic, right? I mean, and they should be involved in something, whatever it is. Like kids, it's great for kids to be involved. But as you said, they need time to just not do anything. Hang out with their friends, be bored. Let kids be bored. That's a good skill to learn, how to be bored.
True.
Okay, so getting back to the calm inside the chaos. So we're going to start by defining what a crisis is. So there could be some sort of an emotional crisis, right? Such as anxiety, depression, identity struggles, or there could be a situational crisis, like a family upheaval, bullying, right? Academic failure, or some examples that I can think of are maybe you lose a main source of income. That could be a crisis, or some sort of illness within the family. That's also another crisis. And what can be really difficult about a family or situational crisis is oftentimes the parents are trying to cope as well. And so it's all about resources, really, in those types of situation in terms of crisis. And resources can get spread kind of thin. And so that can create some difficulties. So what we're going to start with is recognizing a crisis in teens, because this is important to know. These are important warning signs to understand, because, mom and dad can be coping phenomenally with a crisis, or maybe there's not even a situational crisis going on, right? So it's very important to understand and recognize the signs of an emotional crisis in a teen, or when a teen is not coping well. And I guess that's kind of how we can define it too, is as a moment when a teen's usual coping strategies are overwhelmed. So walk me through the signs of an emotional or situational crisis, or when a teen is not coping well.
Yeah. It's interesting because it can be similar to like a toddler. You know,
Mhm.
a toddler being really hungry could look like a temper tantrum or something like that. So it's not always super clear what's going on. But what we want to look for in teens would be things like sudden mood changes or a withdrawal from normal behaviors, aggression, withdrawal from friends and typical enjoyable hobbies for them. Things like that can be kind of an indicator that something's going on if we're not already aware of what's happening. We really want to look for those things. Sometimes they'll take bigger risks, sleeping and eating challenges, maybe academic distress where grades are slipping or a lack of desire to go to school. There could be 1,000 different things, but really what we're looking for is kind of a change from the status quo in behavior, in mood, in conversation, just some sort of change. And that's what we want to kind of be aware of and watch for, especially if we don't know what's happened. If there's a family crisis, we already know there's a crisis going on.
Right.
But if they're experiencing something, difficult from school or in one of their social circles, that's where we're going to watch for these signs that they're going to give off.
And I think it's also important to distinguish that it's going on for a prolonged period of time and in multiple situations, because teens are naturally going to have mood swings. Like, you might wake up and you're like, who is this bear that replaced my teenager? And then maybe the next day they're fine. Or, maybe they're really struggling in a class and so a grade starts to slip. So it's normal for teens to experience kind of normal ups and downs of life, but usually they'll bounce back pretty quickly, right? And so what you're looking for is prolonged, like longer than a week or so, changes is when you need to start being concerned and maybe start trying to figure out, okay, hey, what's going on here? We need to investigate this.
And just to be clear, it could be actually less than a week. Mm-hmm. And sometimes kids can move through a crisis pretty quickly. They're mm-hmm. very resilient. So it is challenging to kind of differentiate between, the normal mood swings of a teen and something more serious going on. And if it is going on for more than a week, I think you're absolutely right, Liz. We got to start figuring out, hey, what's happening, and start those conversations. And as a parent, I think if you're aware and paying attention, you'll see that there'll be a little bit of a difference between their normal ups and down mood behaviors versus something else is happening here. We preach this often, but don't be afraid to listen to that mother's or father's or parental intuition that we've all been given that exists. Pay attention to that. And if you think something's wrong, investigate. And, your role as a parent here is not to come in and fix the problem per se, but to be an anchor and be that solid source of stability for them where they can feel safe and comfortable.
Teen's not always going to tell you what's going on, right? You could want to talk to them and ask them questions and they could say they're fine. So again, just knowing them and knowing what's going on and going off how you feel and watching those behaviors is important to understand, to see and know what they could be experiencing, even if they're not telling you.
Yeah. And they may not want to tell you. That's another thing, is they may try to shut you down, or they may not want to involve you. And so in that instance, it can be, important to say, right, to maybe gently say, okay, if you don't want to talk to me, that's all right. But is there someone else that you can talk to? We need to get you talking to someone, because I'm noticing these behaviors and and I'm concerned. And it can be tricky and it can be difficult. And your teen may even say something like, yeah, I am going through something, but I don't want to talk about it. That could be hard to hear, right? For your kiddo to shut you out. But in that instance, you got to put aside your pride and say, okay, what can I do? How can I support you? Or who are you comfortable getting support from? That's maybe a trusted adult. So and teens are naturally going to rely on friends in time of crisis, and that's not a bad thing. That's okay. But fellow teenagers or fellow friends aren't always going to be looking out for the teen's overall best interest.
Well, and I was going to interject something there. Yeah, like teens appears help in a tough situation may be the worst possible thing, because they don't have the experience and understanding that others might. And so, another thing I thought about right here is could be a good opportunity for a connection with your child to improve the connection and build trust. When a teen says, yeah, something is going on and I don't want to talk about it, it's a great opportunity for parents to acknowledge that, yeah, you know what? Sometimes it is tough to talk about these things. I totally understand where you're coming from. And I would really like for you to talk to someone. I get it if you don't want to talk to me, but I know, Liz, you've mentioned in the past, like, go talk to a church leader or another trusted adult, or, I'm always going to say, maybe we need to look at a therapist or a professional counselor so that you're getting the help that you need. So you're talking to somebody about this and making sure that you're able to wade through some of the difficulties you're experiencing with somebody who could be of significant help.
So I was going to say, what does that look like when your kid's struggling and you want to help them, but they don't want to talk to you and they don't want to open up to you? But I think Jeremiah just kind of answered that perfectly, because you want this opportunity for connection. You want to be the one that's there for them, and you offer it, and then they don't give that. And Liz, you said that's hurtful, right? But going back again to what Jeremiah said previously, is learning to not be the fixer, right? You're not there to fix it for them. And what would be more beneficial for you, instead of being the one to fix it and solve it for them, what would be more beneficial is, like Jeremiah said, like, I'm really sorry you're dealing with that. What can I do to help? Like, and just listen and just be there and be aware. And you can still have that connection with them without them maybe opening up or responding and giving back to you in that way. You can still have that connection with them when you're coming to them from the place of, like, I'm here for you.
Yep.
What do you need? I'm sorry that you're experiencing this, is going to still have that connection, even though it might feel one-sided.
Right. And so as you're saying this, Selena, I'm reminded of something that you said several times on this podcast, and that is, do you want me to listen or do you want advice? And so that can be a really key question to ask, because sometimes teens, they do just need a listening ear. And, as parents, we've been solving their problems since they were babies, right? And as toddlers, that's all we do. Oh, you're hungry? Let me get you a snack. You're thirsty? Let me get you a water. So it's this habit for parents to just jump in and fix the problem, because that's what we've been doing our whole lives. But as teens, sometimes they don't need or want that. They're not looking for your advice. They're not looking for you to solve the problem. They just need someone to talk to. They just need to get it off their chest. They just need to vent. And as adults, I know we've all experienced that too, how good it feels just to get it out. There's been so many times where I've gone to a friend and I'm like, oh, thank you for just listening. I just needed to get it all out. Teens feel the same way. And as hard as it can be to hold back as a parent, it's key. It can be really critical in helping develop that connection and helping your teen feel comfortable coming to you in the future.
Well, and that is a big part of this, right? If we are in a situation where a teen doesn't want to share with us, and we support that and we acknowledge what they're experiencing without taking it personal and getting defensive or kind of picking back at them, we build that connection. And what happens next time when they're having a struggle, we actually increase the likelihood that they're going to open up to us about hard things, because they know, you know what, mom or dad or both are able to kind of manage what I share with them. And man, they just support me, and I don't necessarily have to tell them everything. And that feels really good. And so creating that space with you and with them is such a powerful tool in developing future connection and future trust with your child.
I think we all want our kids to be confident. And a really good way to build self-confidence for our kids is to allow them to make choices and make decisions and problem solve for themselves. So this is a really great opportunity to help them in building their self-confidence. Because when we come in and we just fix it and try to give them advice and try to change it and do it for them, actually what's saying to them is, like, you're not capable of being able to handle this.
Right.
And so by allowing them to make that choice, and even if that means they fail or makes things worse. It's building that self-confidence for them that they're capable to be able to make choices and learn and grow.
Yeah. And it's a great opportunity to ask a question such as, oh man, that sounds really difficult. I'm sorry you're going through that. What do you think you might do here to solve this challenge you're experiencing? And that kind of puts the ball back in their court and helps them start thinking about like, okay, how do I fix this if they haven't already? And definitely, like Selina said, it builds their own confidence in solving their own problems. And it's a great exercise for us as parents to allow our children to start solving their own struggles. And just by asking and exploring with them what they might do to solve the problem without us trying to answer that question, then you got to keep your mouth shut. That's the hard part. You ask that question and then you keep your mouth shut and let them talk.
But we have so much great wisdom.
I know we do, and we know how to solve it. And sometimes it seems like, oh, this is so simple and easy. We can fix this right away. All you need to do is this and this and this. And we know that, and we're probably right. That's the whole thing about it. You're probably right, but they haven't learned it yet, and they won't learn it if you keep solving it. They need to learn it, and they'll see that they can solve it and overcome it. And again, when you look at this, a crisis for a teen might not look the same as it does for mom and dad. Right. Unless of course it's a family crisis, but for them, a crisis is, their best friend just told them you never want to speak to them again or whatever. That's a crisis for a teen. Yes. And it's overwhelming. And, a parent might be like, oh, come on, you and this friend have this fight every other month, and maybe they do, but it's still a crisis for them. And so acknowledging it, helping them work through it, and not being dismissive. Dismissing a teen crisis is so painful, and it absolutely will sever the connection in that moment between parent and child. So don't be dismissive of what they're experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is easier for us because, well, keep in mind, we've been through it all. Like, we already did a bunch of crisis, and we coped, we got through it, and we learned, worse things are going to happen in life. Your teen isn't there yet. They haven't had all of this life experience that you have. They haven't had the experience of, maybe a divorce, being fired from a job, struggling to make ends meet, right? They haven't been through all of these things. And so in their world, losing a friend is the absolute worst thing that can happen to them in their, 14, 15 very short years of life. And so keeping the perspective and remembering what it was like to be a teenager can be really helpful. Okay, so I would like to take a minute to share kind of our own family crisis that is still semi-recent to us, and kind of some of our coping strategies that we implemented kind of as a family to deal with. So most longtime listeners are aware that we've got a kiddo, our 5-year-old son, with some health complications. And so he has a lot of allergies. And with allergies, it's common for kids to develop what's called ARFID, avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. And so kids just aren't interested in eating. They don't want food. They don't like food. They don't eat a wide variety of food. Well, the problem is he's also hypoglycemic. So his body doesn't regulate the blood sugar on its own. That is not a good combination. And his blood sugar will drop scary low. And we went through this 4-month period where we were in the hospital every 3 weeks, it seemed like, for low blood sugar. And it was just over and over. And it felt like this cloud hanging over our head of, when is he going to get sick, or when is he going to stop eating? When is his blood sugar going to drop? And when are we going to go back to the hospital? Because in that moment, everything comes crashing to a halt. I have to stop whatever I'm doing, pack a bag, go to the hospital, and nobody sees us for 3 or 4 days, sometimes up to 5 days. And so that can be a crisis situation. And so in that instance, some of the techniques that my family employed was oftentimes communication. And thankfully our girls were 7 and 11 at the time. And so they were kind of old enough to understand, the youngest needs mom right now, but we still wanted to talk about it, right? Because what I didn't want my girls to feel or think or worry is that, does mom love him more because she's dedicating all this time to him, right? And so another big thing that we did to kind of help our family through this crisis was call on family and community. So most people know that we're pretty involved in church, and our church community was always really fantastic about rallying and helping out, helping get kids to and from church or to and from various activities. And then our biggest resource was my father-in-law, who was living with us at the time, and he was instrumental in helping us all through this, because in those instances, Curtis had a full-time job, but he still had 2 other kids to take care of. And so utilizing resources, right? Calling on extended family, calling on community is key in getting through some sort of situational crisis to help a family in a time of need.
Yeah, definitely utilizing those resources is critical. And I think one of the biggest keys that you're sharing here, Liz, is that as parents, when the crisis is family centered versus, a crisis that a kid is having in their own social or personal lives, parents are often overwhelmed. Well, they are overwhelmed. That's what makes it a crisis, but they're often overwhelmed to the point where they may not function at a normal level. And that has an impact on the children, especially those teens that we're talking about, and their worries all of a sudden grow, and they're wondering what's happening. And we don't do a great job of communicating with them. So as we manage our own emotions as adults, we're actually modeling for our children how to work through a crisis. And then as we communicate with them and help set their minds at ease, like, no, mom and dad know how to handle this. And yes, it's difficult and it's scary, but we know how to handle it. And we're here to help you as well. Again, now we're strengthening the connection and improving the communication and being able to utilize one another. I don't think there's a greater source of strength in a crisis than family relationships.
Yeah.
They're so important in these situations. And so taking the time to recognize that and being able to sit down and breathe for a minute as an adult and recognize, like, okay, what's happening and who's experiencing what becomes really important. Because like in a crisis like yours, the heavy focus is right there on that one child that's experiencing the blood sugar challenges. And we tend to forget that we have, maybe a teenager at home or whatever, and that they're freaking out and wondering what's going on, and they deserve to know and understand what's happening at the best of their ability.
I love how you were talking about communication and opening up and expressing how each one of you are experiencing that and allowing everyone to be honest and open. Just the example of you saying, like, oh, I feel really bad, and I feel like maybe you feel like I love him more because I have to spend this time. And then were them expressing those same feelings or something like that. And then you can understand what they're experiencing and knowing what's going on for them in their world. And that helps you to, again, connection and understand each other, but modeling for them, this is what I'm experiencing. This is what is hard for me. This is what I'm doing. But then also them seeing what you're doing to help in yourself in that situation, whether that's meditation or taking a walk or taking a nap, whatever it is for you that helps you to regulate and be able to handle emotional resilience.
And it's also perfectly okay to say to your kid, I feel a lot of stress right now, and I feel spread pretty thin, and I feel like I'm struggling to cope with this too. This is just hard. And you're going to make mistakes. Maybe you snapped at your kid, or you yelled at him, or you didn't handle a situation right. It's okay to come back and admit that. I didn't handle that the best. I'd like to repair and talk it through. That just helps teach kids emotional resilience, and that, yeah, mom and dad struggle, and it's okay to struggle, and maybe just giving them reassurance. Maybe even asking them, what are you struggling with this? I know you see me struggling, but I want to understand what you're struggling with this, or what's hard about this for you right now, just to create maybe some of that emotional safety. And so that, they can understand I'm involved in this too, and I matter too, because a crisis, it's consuming, right? And it's really stressful. And so just having that communication can really be key in those instances.
Definitely.
Okay. So If at any point any type of crisis feels too overwhelming or feels too big, I can't talk about a crisis without talking about the 988 crisis hotline. And it doesn't have to be just suicide, it can be any sort of crisis, emotional, mental, physical. Okay, well, if it's genuinely a physical crisis, you probably need 911,
Yes.
right? Don't call 988 if someone's bleeding out, call 911, right? But if it is, some sort of mental or emotional crisis, 988 is a great resource for you or for your teen. So, always worth mentioning. Okay, so if you see your teen or your kiddo, if maybe they just really seem to be in the moment, not handling things, like maybe they just feel like they're panicking or it's just so overwhelming, it can be oftentimes scary for parents to see that, or they want to just jump in and fix it, or sometimes they can get themselves worked out. So staying calm in a crisis can be really hard, but with some practice, you can do it. So let's take an example of a panic attack. Your kid is starting to have a panic attack. That can be kind of scary because maybe they look like they're struggling to breathe, their eyes are wide, and they, in that moment, genuinely feel like they are dying. That's a very common experience with a panic attack. And so oftentimes parents want to panic. So the important thing is to just stay calm, right? And use maybe some grounding techniques. And it doesn't have to just be a panic attack. It could just be any moment of feeling overwhelmed. Just staying, using a calm, reassuring voice, grounding techniques, offer to touch them. Hey, can I hold your hand? Can I give you a hug? Can I hold you? If they don't want that, that's fine, right? Say, okay, can we breathe together? What else is around you? What do you feel? What do you feel immediately? Talk about maybe the clothes that they're wearing. What textures do you feel, right? So grounding techniques can be really helpful in those instances of just emotional dysregulation for kids.
Yeah, definitely using those grounding techniques can be powerful. Breathing is always, a great tool to use to find calm. For having a really serious panic attack, sometimes 911 is the answer, actually, as panic attacks can result in other physical ailments like you talked about that might require some additional intervention, especially if we're not a source of calm for them. And so, professional help is sometimes critical. And so don't be afraid to utilize that. You as a parent are not going to be equipped to take on absolutely everything. No parent is. I'm not, right, and nobody else is. So professional help can be super helpful. And then, those grounding techniques. And the thing about it is, if we teach those on a regular basis within our home to our children, when the crisis comes up, they're going to be better equipped to utilize them, right? So if we're all of a sudden say, okay, well, you're having this panic attack and you're freaking out right now, so I want to teach you how to do some grounding, like it's going to be a lot less effective. And of course, practicing it as a parent before as well is quite helpful.
Absolutely. So I had a good instance where I was able to offer some reassurance to our oldest, and I think she was in 4th grade. And it was when we found out that our son was hypoglycemic. And because we didn't know, we weren't monitoring his blood sugar, we weren't monitoring for symptoms. And so we woke up one morning and he was conscious, but he was at an altered level of consciousness. So it's like his eyes are open and the lights are on, but nobody's home. He wasn't responding to anything. He was basically in a hypoglycemic coma, is what they call it. And so this was at like 6:30 in the morning, and our daughter was getting ready to get on the bus. And so, Grandpa got her on the bus for her as we were just rushing our kid out the door. We live close enough to the hospital that it was quicker to drive there than to call 911. And this was a genuine emergent situation. And our poor kid watched this happen. And at some point, I gained enough lucidity once he had been stabilized in the hospital to say, I should probably call her and tell her that her brother is okay. And that's certainly an appropriate strategy because all she saw was us carrying him out the door, cause, and Curtis and I are obviously like, we have to go, like something is wrong. We need to go to the emergency right now. And she watched all of this happen. And so it felt like divine intervention definitely in that moment to say, okay, I'm going to call the school and just ask to talk to her to say, hey, your brother's okay. This is what happened and this is what we're doing to help him. And I can still tell, even all of these years later, that it's a source of trauma for her because she's talked about it. And it's okay that she felt traumatized by it. We've talked through it, we've worked through it, and we're still working through it. But just understanding that, well, as we've said, kids experience a crisis too.
Yep. Kids do experience those things. And I'm glad you're able to communicate that with your daughter that, hey, he's okay. Definitely helpful.
All right. So in conclusion, let's talk about some long-term strategies, right? And so once we've moved through the crisis, kind of what now? And so once the crisis is passed, there can still be a lot of, I guess, residual emotions and residual trauma. So one of the things that can be helpful for kids is maybe offering them to journal. Like, hey, yeah, write it down. And it can be private thoughts. I'm never going to read this. You can say whatever you need to about it. Or, if they are still not coping, obviously professional help, like the crisis is passed and they're still just really struggling and can't seem to get past it. Professional help, such as therapy, is always also recommended. And then just offering, hey, if you ever need to revisit this, or if you realize something or you want to come back, I'm always available to listen to you talk about this crisis. Even though it's past, we can always revisit it. So just helping create more connection and emotional safety.
Yeah, always long-term strategy is always going to be maintaining the connection, maintaining a safe place to have conversation where your teen feels confident in having conversation with you. Long-term strategy means practicing, being calm and healthy coping mechanisms for whatever types of things that you experience. All of those things are really important. And I do love that we can always go back and revisit things and have conversations, even when things are past. As they come up for you, come talk to mom and dad. And we're happy to talk through them and walk through them again on an as needed basis for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Final thoughts.
Yeah, just again, that connection and your reaction to the situation is going to help build that. So staying calm, not trying to fix it, and just being there and really listening to what it is they need and not what you think that they need, and being okay with what they do share and not share.
Yeah. And you know what? You don't need to have all the answers as a parent. Neither does your child. That's okay. Like Selina said, your presence, being there, being calm will have the greatest effect. Not the solutions, not the I'm in charge and going to make all this happen and fix all this, but just being there. And so, here's a great opportunity. Take some time today to figure out something that you can do to start practicing being calm in difficult situations. If you haven't practiced it as a parent yourself, it's going to be harder to do when, the temperatures are rising and the blood is boiling or whatever's happening, the fear is set in. It's going to be harder to practice these things. So take some time now and do it regularly to practice calming strategies, the breathing techniques, meditation, grounding. All of those things can be very powerful, but are much more powerful when we have practiced them and know how to do it.
Yep, absolutely. And kids can be amazingly resilient. And what kids really need more than anything is one stable adult that they can trust. That is like a golden ticket in helping kids survive a crisis. So to the best of your ability is be that stable person they can trust. Don't ever lie to your kids in a crisis. That is, I think, another key thing. And sometimes it can be hard not to. For example, if it's the death of a family, it can be really hard to say, oh, no, they're going to be fine. They're going to be fine. But you don't know that, right? And so I think honesty and transparency as appropriate is going to be also key for kids in a crisis. Okay, so next week we are going to get into emotional intelligence, and we will see you all then. Have a question? How about a topic you'd like us to cover? Send us an email at mentalhealthpod21@gmail.com.